Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's show. And if you're joining for the first time, this is part of our e-commerce series for which we meet every Wednesday at 5:30 p.m. Eastern, and we review one technology or the solution from the commerce community. For today, we have a slightly legacy yet very popular solution called osCommerce. So we are going to be talking about them in terms of where they are, and if you are considering them as the potential commerce solution, then you are probably going to have a million questions. So we are going to dig into all of that. Before we do that, I am going to provide you my quick intro. If you don't know me, I am Sam Gupta, your host and principal at Elevate IQ. Elevate IQ is the independent e-commerce and digital transformation consulting firm. We help our clients when they are looking for any sort of help in organizing their e-commerce initiative, whether you talk about creating the business case, selecting the platform, or taking through the entire implementation. We have the end-to-end capabilities. So on that note, going back to today's topic, but if you are in the audience and have any sort of questions or comments, please post them in the chat box. I'll be checking them and answering them as we move on to the show. And if you run out of time, then we'll make sure that you guys are going to receive your answers. On that note, quickly on osCommerce. osCommerce is an open source platform, and that's probably the reason why they are so popular. And as with most of the e-commerce platforms that we have reviewed so far, and my understanding is that we have done Magento, which is Adobe Commerce now. We have done PrestaShop, and I think ShopView, that is also the open source, but they are slightly more modern. So the majority of the open source platform that you are going to review, they are probably going to be part of the PHP community in general. PHP is where the majority of the open source community is. So there are always going to be the pros and cons of the open source. Now, when people think about open source, they are always thinking in their head that open source means free. But you need to understand how the open source business model works. And it's always important to understand, especially if you are an executive and considering this decision and you are talking to your developers. Developers are always going to have perspective, and they are probably going to be leaning more towards open source. Now, open source could be a great idea. There is no problem with open source as an option. It's just that you just need to understand your financials in terms of what is going to be the cost. Even though open source, typically when people think about open source, they are always thinking that it's going to be free. It's very rarely that anything you are going to get is going to be free. There are going to be financials involved. It's just going to be in different form. Now, let's say you are a developer yourself, you're running an e-commerce shop, and you are not as big, and you don't have funds to hire either the developers, and you can manage everything on your own. You don't have as many sales. Now, that's a very different scenario, because your opportunity cost is probably not as relevant. You could be selling more, but if you are not able to sell, then probably you can spend time in maintaining your site. So this is one scenario of the customer where open source could make sense. But now, when you grow, obviously you need to consider when you are hiring people, whether you need to be hiring more on the sales side or the commerce side. So all of those decisions you need to consider. In general, the way open source companies make money, and it's very important to understand how they make money. Obviously, you have a little community aspect with any open source platform, where the code is free because a lot of open source developers are committing the code. But there are two reasons why they are involved with the open source community. Number one, obviously they get authority in the market. They build their resume by committing to the open source platforms. Their resume in general is going to be far stronger. And the second motivation that they have is they might be able to sell any of the add-ons on the e-commerce platform itself. So for the most part, that's how most of the open source developer communities are run, that they are either trying to sell hosting, and hosting is never free. So when people think about, okay, I'm going to be comparing this with my Shopify, so when you are doing that comparison, you are not necessarily comparing the hosting, the maintenance cost that you are anyways going to incur, which is probably going to be more expensive in general, not the code itself. So when you are looking at all of these variables, make sure you account for all of that, and rather than buying simply the open source pitch that it is going to be free. The only thing that is going to be free is going to be your code, but at times even open source could be more expensive than your packaged offering. So again, do your competition, do your math, understand different variables that are going to be involved, and sometimes those variables might not be known to you right away, because what you might be looking at as your developers might not know every single cost element that you may incur. So you need to be talking to either an architect or the program manager or the CIO, if you have access to those people. If you don't have, then maybe hire a consultant who can help you with these decisions. But typically developers are not going to have the entire picture, because they really like to develop, and for them the financial aspect, they might not have as much insight. So make sure you consider the comprehensive picture before you select the platform. Now, overall, in terms of the in the case of osCommerce, you are going to get a lot of capabilities in general. Okay, the way it is positioned. If you're going to be reading the marketing material, then you are going to get so much capabilities overall from the product perspective. And sometimes that could be misleading, because there are other layers to e-commerce that you need to consider other than just the business functionality, because that matters. For example, let's say if you want to rank on SEO, then you have to make sure that the platform that you are going to be choosing, the technology that you are going to be choosing, is going to be SEO friendly. And we are going to be touching all of those things during the slides when we are going to cover during our presentation today. So overall, these are the things that you need to be keeping in mind. osCommerce is targeted for very small shops in general, and that is probably going to be in some million dollar in revenue, or GMV. That's where their place is. It's very you are not going to find a lot of shops that are going to be multi-million dollar and on osCommerce, because they might have far more capabilities. Most of the shops that are going to be there probably are going there for the cost reasons, unless they might have an affinity, depending upon the developers that you might have on the staff. They might recommend that you should be going for osCommerce. In general, the community is not as developed as some of the other open source communities that you are going to find. So even if you are going for open source, there are better open source options available out there. On that note, I am going to start with the quick slides, and we are going to be touching on a lot of different aspects. So typically during our show, we look at 4 or 5 different perspectives. So the very first perspective that we look at is, okay, how is this platform trying to position themselves in the market, and which are the businesses that are going to be right. So we are teaching you the process that we take here internally at Elevate IQ whenever we are going to be reviewing any sort of platforms from the enterprise architecture perspective, from many different variables that you need to consider when you are going to be selecting any of the platform. So by looking at the market positioning of a specific vendor, you can learn a lot, and we are going to be discussing the market positioning for osCommerce. So here on the site, obviously, this is very fancy in general, not as fancy as some of the modern sites that you're going to see. But if you are going to be comparing this with their own platform, then you are going to find that, okay, at least their site is decent. So here, one of the things that you're going to notice, call to action is very important to understand, because that's how you know how they sort of make money. So here they are asking you to host on their platform, and that's a pitch that most of the e-commerce platforms are going to have. So here they are saying host with osCommerce, and that's what they want you to do, because that's how they make money. Or host on your own as well. If you are going to be hosting, then you are going to be responsible for the heavy lifting, not only from the code perspective, but also from the infrastructure perspective. So you can do that as well if you would like to save money. Obviously, the code is going to be free, but then you have to still worry about the maintenance, which could get very expensive. But again, let's say if you're on budget, you're a developer, and you're hosting on your server, that could be a possibility. But then you have to also consider the security, and we have had a lot of different incidents in terms of security when you are going to be hosting. Obviously, some of these hosting platforms are going to be slightly superior in terms of their capabilities in managing the security. So now if you're going to be hosting on third-party platforms, then it's a different case. But for the most part, you are still looking at the cost of those platforms too. For the most part, in the PHP community, you can probably find really affordable option, and that is probably not going to be as comparable with some of the other platforms that we are going to have, such as your Shopify, which is obviously going to be slightly more expensive, but the value that you get as part of the package is just tremendous. And sometimes you might not know if you're simply starting on your e-commerce journey. So just keep those points in mind if you are going to be comparing these platforms. So now here, the other things that you might want to notice, as they are talking about so many different things. For example, obviously the award is there. So here, osCommerce V4, then they have roughly 245 add-ons. Now, typically in most e-commerce communities, what you're going to notice is they make money by selling add-ons. Okay. Or these add-ons are going to require a lot more technical heavy lifting. So let's say if you don't have the in-house developers, and those developers are not free, then what you need to do is, you might be buying the add-on, and sometimes the add-ons could be more expensive than your platform itself, or the development, the configuration, the integration of those add-ons could be more expensive. So again, these are all variables that you need to consider as part of your e-commerce initiative, because that's actually going to factor in your margins. And depending upon how much margin you have, you need to account for all of the cost that you might have. Now, obviously, they are talking about 487 live sites, but that is only on the V4 version, and that must be their new version. So they are talking about that they have only 487 sites. Obviously, that's slightly on a lower side for this small size of the platform. But overall, they have roughly 47,000 live sites. So obviously, that's a decent number. And sometimes even the bigger platforms might not have that number. So that's why the size of the customer is going to be super important as well. The number of customers that you are going to have, or number of sites you are going to have that are going to have, let's say, $10,000 to $100,000 in revenue, there are going to be a lot more in general. Okay, versus a million, 2 million, billion. The number is going to be far lower because though you don't have as many customers in the market. So here, when you are looking at 47, that's still very low, because these are really the hobbyists, the entrepreneurs, the side gig people who are probably running an e-commerce store. So that's why you have this number. But overall, this is a fairly well-developed community. They have been there in the market for very long, for 10 years roughly. And during those days, I think their positioning was very strong in terms of the kind of capabilities that they could provide. Now, in 2023, I'm not too sure if they should be your platform of choice, depending upon what your variables are overall in terms of who you are choosing. But overall, they are fairly outdated in terms of their capabilities. So here, let's talk about some more points. And here we have 300,000 strong osCommerce community members to receive and give e-commerce platform advice. And this is the size of the community. And these are the either open source developer or community members that are part of this community. Obviously, that's a huge factor, how many people are really involved in the community, because that is going to be an indication that the code base is being updated. People are going to be responding when you are going to have problems, because obviously with open source, you are looking at open source forums. When you are going to be needing any sort of support, there might be some companies that might provide the commercial support, but again, you need to account for that cost as well, and sometimes that could be expensive too. So when you are looking at SaaS, you get a lot more. In general, with open source, you might not get all of that. So here they have segmented this into 3 different categories. And again, we are looking at the market positioning, how they are positioning. So obviously they have the retail app pack, and these are going to be the add-ons. And we don't know whether these retail, wholesale, and enterprise pack can coexist. Most likely they might be the way it is positioned, because they are saying that these are probably add-ons, add-on apps, so they can probably work together. So where it is going to play, this particular factor is going to be in play as, let's say, if you are B2C plus B2B from the business model perspective, so you might require both of these capabilities. So here they are talking about game-changing add-ons. Okay, so pay attention to the words that they are using. Obviously this is all marketing speak, but they, and most likely the cost of this is probably going to be 5x. So here they are talking about add osCommerce mode apps to your osCommerce online store to get access to the same game-changing technology that empowers online commerce for some of the world's most recognized brands. Now, obviously, that's a lot of marketing there. I don't think that is true. In fact, I mean, we tried to access some of the sites that were quoted in some of the affiliate sites, and we could not get to those sites. So they are not going to be on world's most recognized brands, but they are definitely popular. So here then we have the osCV4 wholesale pack, and obviously the B2B capabilities are going to be far deeper. If you are looking for similar capabilities, at least in the open source community, then you are looking at Adobe Commerce, but they also have their commercial version. With open source, you typically don't get everything. That may be a starter pack that you might be able to get, but then once you get sophisticated in your capabilities, in terms of whether it is going to be any sort of conversion rate optimization, or you need to use any sort of add-ons or integrations, that's where you are probably going to run out of the options, and they are going to push you to the enterprise version in general. But you can probably get started on open source if you like. You always have those options. So here the comparable is probably going to be Magento, but these guys are also very deep in terms of capabilities, and sometimes the capabilities could be misleading too, because you need to pay attention to the technology, and sometimes only developers might be able to tell or the architects what kind of technology they might be using, because especially in e-commerce that matters a lot for SEO, for your conversion rate optimization. So here they are talking about extend osCommerce with wholesale functionality for distributors and manufacturers, automate processes, simplify customer onboarding. So B2B plus B2C, very interesting capabilities, obviously, because they are very deep in general in the functional capabilities. And sometimes, these tools might have uh, far deeper capabilities in general than some of the leading platforms that you might have in the B2C or B2B community. So here they also have the enterprise pack, and as part of the enterprise pack, they are talking about, okay, the instant power of online ERP level platform. Now they are saying ERP level platform, which could be a little misleading. Yes, you can do a lot from the sales and marketing perspective inside the platform, and a lot of e-commerce vendors try to claim these capabilities as the ERP capabilities. But typically, when you are going to be using, and depending upon how complex your shop is. If you don't really care for the costing, the inventory, let's say if you are a pure play retailer or distributor, so you don't necessarily care for those MRP, but you still need to account for the unit cost. And unit cost or unit economics in the e-commerce world, it could be very difficult if you don't really have the clear understanding of how your inventory is moving, because your financials are going to be very separate from your e-commerce. So again, those are going to be your architectural considerations. As you grow in your capabilities, you'll probably be understanding these concepts more, but overall the e-commerce platform can very rarely act as the ERP. The whole idea of ERP term is that you are going to have very integrated processes from the operations perspective, from the supply chain perspective, from procurement, from finance perspective. E-commerce platform alone cannot serve all of these concerns. So they are never going to be the ERP capable, but obviously from the order capture perspective, they can provide a lot. Now, some of the things that we noticed overall from the community perspective, obviously they are trying to highlight their community. And surprisingly enough, their community was very active. Okay. So even though the platform is very outdated, and by this time you will think that, nobody is probably using this or interested in this community, because, everybody sort of have moved on to slightly more newer platforms. But surprisingly enough, the developers are still committed to it. They are still hanging out in the community. So I don't know what's the rationale. Why would people stick to this community? There must be a reason. At least we were not able to find why people are sticking to this community. Even if you're looking for open source options, you are probably going to have superior options. So we just didn't understand. There must be a rationale. Maybe they are getting something from the functionality perspective that they are not able to get anywhere else. Or maybe Magento is probably too complex for them, because obviously in general it could be very complex for some of the developers. So for us, we just could not find but the reasons why people are committing. Or maybe some developers, they just they may have been there for last 10 years and they don't want to move on. That could be another reason why they are sticking. But it's shocking that their community is very active. So there must be something there that people are liking it. We just could not find what could be those reasons. Now, this is how, and sometimes there is going to be a disconnect between how the user interface is going to look versus, what you are going to see from the capabilities perspective. And this is where the demo could be very important as well. So here we are looking at in this site, I was saying that their own site is probably superior than this, and I don't know if they have used this for their own site. So that is sort of the indication for you that, okay, they are not able to sell their own site on this platform, or maybe they got that because they had to do a lot of customization on this platform to be able to create that. So you are looking for either that kind of work or that much money to be able to get there. But that is the kind of experience that people are expecting in 2023. So if you are going to be here, it's going to be really hard to get any sort of return from your e-commerce initiatives. You are probably better off not doing just anything, I guess. In e-commerce, if you are going to be utilizing something like this, e-commerce is all about customer experience. So you cannot provide the customer experience that your competitors are going to provide. And sometimes when you are going to be looking at your brick and mortar location, there you have the location advantage, you have the in-person advantage. People are buying from local people, so the experience does not matter as much in the retail setting. But when you talk about e-commerce, the users can go to Amazon. So you are literally competing with the big boys in the e-commerce space. So their expectation of the experience is probably going to be similar. Now, if you have unique categories or the products that you are selling that your customers cannot find anywhere, then they are probably going to be fine with anything, whatever you can provide. But for the most part, let's say if you are simply selling iPhone, and iPhone they can buy either on your site or Amazon, they are probably going to go to Amazon if it is going to be the same price, just because of the experience that they're going to get. So that's the real difference between the e-commerce experience versus your brick and mortar experience. So let's say if you're starting on the journey, you need to consider all of those factors. So, and most likely when you are considering this platform, it's very likely that you are probably going to be starting on your e-commerce journey. So here we have the store, and it seems like the way the store is done, and this is their demo site, and typically you can figure out a lot from the demo site as well, because that is the target market, that speaks for the target market, the sample data as well as the demo site. Typically that is the first one that companies create, and they are probably not going to be making any changes in that, because it takes a lot of time to create the theme, the data. It's going to be the entire app. So they are not going to be changing on a daily basis as they change their target market. So you can glean a lot overall by looking at, okay, what was their original business model or the sample theme. If this is going to be related to electronics, most likely electronics companies are probably going to be using this platform. So those are some of the signals that you can read when you are going to be talking to vendors and you are going to be looking at their demos. Now, one of the things that you're going to notice is they are on localhost, and this is the demo from the osCommerce, and this is coming from 2018. And obviously, these screenshots are taken from their YouTube demo videos, and we could not find a ton. And this is probably the latest experience. 2018, I think by that time we had Bootstrap, so and even the headless platform, so the technology was much more evolved in general in 2018. So I don't see a reason why these guys would not update. Even in the PHP community, you are probably going to get far superior experience. So I don't know why either developers are not updating or the community is not updating, but it's obviously the whole UI experience is very outdated. It's almost like as if they are 20 years behind in their capabilities. It's very, very, very outdated in general, the way look and feel is. Now, this is the admin portal. So it's very shocking and surprising that the admin portal actually has better UX than the site itself. Can you believe this? Okay. So typically you would think that even if you are going to have the inferior experience on the admin portal, then you are probably going to be okay, because again, your customers are not looking at this one, right? Even though it might not be as convenient even for your internal users, but here you have slightly richer experience, and this seems like it is more, HTML sort of 5 experience, and probably they have used some sort of bootstrap component here in designing this experience. So obviously this is slightly more modern, but it's just counterintuitive that they have not updated the actual platform that is going to the end users, but they have updated the internal platform. So sometimes that could be confusing if you are going to be new to the e-commerce. And as you can see, this is done on PHP, and this is how you are probably going to be finding about the platform. Okay, which technologies are they going to be using? But overall, in terms of the capabilities, they are very functionally rich in general. So obviously you have the order, you have the catalog. Can you believe this? Obviously there's a very advanced B2b functionality in general. So functionally, they are probably going to be very, very rich, similar to your Magento of the world. But here, again, the user experience is going to be very inferior in general. So some more comments here. So now we are looking at some of the affiliate sites, and this is the e-commerce guide sites. And I don't know why they have given this platform 8.25, but this could be very misleading for people who might be exploring this for the first time. And sometimes these affiliate sites, just because the amount of content that they are producing and the amount of money that they are making is very low in general. So you need to be really careful when you're going to be looking at the affiliate sites, because a lot of this content could be automated, and sometimes they might not even know how they are positioning themselves in the market. So it could be very confusing for the customers, especially if they are going to be rating this. Now, after the change in the algorithm, the recent change that Google did with their algorithm, I don't know if affiliate sites are going to be ranking lower. There is a possibility because now they are looking for the expertise of the author, and whether they are expert on the same topic or not. So everybody sort of needs to align their LinkedIn profile versus the expertise versus whether on social media the author is really known as the expert. So now affiliate site might not be ranking as higher on Google ranking, but still they will figure their ways out. So you need to be careful when you're looking at them. There are some really trusted ones, but there are some which could be extremely misleading. In this particular case, eCommerce Guide, and I'm still shocked that they have given 8.25 ranking for this particular platform. By the way, when you are going to be, so they are saying that websites using osCommerce, if you are going to go for Print Zone, that's a very big brand in general. Buy Bees and Wishlets, none of these sites were working, I guess, or they were not on osCommerce. So make sure you guys do your research. These are not their real customers, but they have still mentioned. So I don't know if this site is automated or whatever, but be careful with these affiliate sites. They are saying ease of use 8 of 10. Support 8 out of 10. Whose support are we talking about? Are we talking about support of the community, or are we talking about support of the vendor who is going to be hosting? So not sure where the 8 number is coming from. The features, they are definitely rich. So I'm actually shocked that they have given 7. They could probably get 9 on features, again depending upon how you are rating them and who you are rating against. In general, the features are probably on a higher side because they were very functionally rich. It's just they are the technology that is not updated, and that's the biggest concern that I personally have. The pricing is 10 out of 10 because obviously they are open source, so obviously they are ranking higher, and that could be the reason why they are 8.25. But overall, when I look at this criteria, this is very misleading because it does not probably account for the technology, which is probably the leading factor in general with most e-commerce platforms. So you need to be careful there. Recommended for large community. Okay, so you can see that this is probably community centric commerce, I guess. That's where they are probably trying to recommend. So I don't know if this is more related to not for profit. That could be a possibility that probably it's very popular there. Just because not for profit, you are probably going to get a lot of volunteers, and that could be the reason why it could be popular. And then obviously they are probably not going to have as many grants and funds to be able to spend on the real developer cost, but the developers are free because it's probably done by volunteers. So that could be a possibility that they have so many different sites and users. So again, read between the lines when you're looking at any sort of platforms. Just by looking at the number, you cannot tell why they have so many users and why so many companies might be using it. Now, the next thing they are saying is easy to hack and modify, which is probably true as well for the most e-commerce sites. But be careful when they say easy to hack, which also means that if you are going to be hacking, means the developer who is going to be hacking is only the one who is going to know the how to basically maintain and update. So you are sort of creating the lock with that developer. So that's probably going to be a business risk in general. Now, depending upon how seasoned the developer is, how good the developer is, most of the experienced and seasoned developer, they are going to be really good at documentation overall, so that other developers can pick up. Less seasoned developers, they are not as great in general. So that could be a challenge for other people to be able to pick up on where the other person left. So again, when you are going to be looking at modifying is great. But again, you need to think through why you are modifying certain things. If you are getting some sort of business value by modification, go ahead and do that. But if you're not getting that, then probably that's going to be a challenge. So we have some comments here, so I'll cover those before I move on to the next ones. So Anders is saying, re add-ons, I'm glad to see that the 245 add-ons counted were all built by osCommerce, which means they'll support them. No, they are not even supporting the platform. They are built by the open source developers. So even the support is going to be provided by the community. It's not going to be provided by osCommerce. The only thing they are going to be supporting is going to be, if you are going to be hosting with them, then they will support. So obviously they have to make money, and depending upon your support model, in terms of, and in general, you are going to notice this when we are going to be looking at the reviews, that their developers are very expensive in general, and that's another factor that you need to consider. The smaller the community, the more expensive the developers are going to be, because they are hanging on to that community because they can make a lot more money than updating their knowledge. So again, when you look at the supply demand curve of how this whole development life cycle works, the newer technologies, fewer developers, that is going to be very expensive in general. The outdated technologies are equally expensive. So you probably want to be somewhere in middle if you really want to have the right solution from the dollar perspective. So keep that in mind. You don't want to hang on for too long, especially with the outdated technologies. So now Anders is saying the 9,000 add-ons for the previous versions surely include community build technology, which are obviously zero support. You are so right. I could not agree more. One more comment here. Re-updated admin portal UX, perhaps they felt it was lower risk to update the admin side, since any bugs would not affect the front end that was processing sales. Maybe it's a clue as to the direction of future front end look and feel. And I have to agree with Anders on this particular comment. In general, when you are looking at the way the e-commerce platforms are designed in general, so the way, obviously, you are going to have a lot of control inside the platform to be able to split the HTML and CSS that is going to be in the final site. So typically, the challenge that most legacy platforms run into when they need to decide whether to upgrade something or not is that whole migration strategy. Now, with the platform vendors, some customers are going to be on many different versions. It could be 100 versions, and they need to support all of those versions of code. So it could be a nightmare for a technical vendor to be able to update. So that's where they sort of pick their bets. Now, when you look at the admin side, so Anders is right that admin side is probably going to be easier to update because only users are using it, and you don't probably have as much impact overall from the Google perspective, from SEO perspective. So that's why admin is probably going to be an easier lift in general in terms of the update than updating the actual platform. So that could be the rationale, but I don't know. I mean, I have seen the open source community fights as almost like condo board fights. Okay, these developers are very passionate, the way their decisions are made. So I don't know, why they would stick to the existing sort of core platform, because typically most developers want to work on the newer technologies, but it just doesn't make any sense. So Anders, you're right that overall the future of this particular platform is probably not there, but my suspicion based on that comment is going to be that it is probably used by the communities where you have a lot of free developers, and maybe universities where you have a lot of development hours that is going to be free, and you don't have a ton of cost, and you might have your in-house servers that you might want to host on. So that could be a possibility. That's where they might have very active community, or maybe students are really playing on the platform. That could be another possibility that it is really popular. So again, read between the lines before making any sort of decision on the platform. On that note, follow Underscreen, ANDERSGREN, amazing guy. You should definitely connect with him on LinkedIn. Thank you so much, Anders, for those comments. If you have more comments, please post them in the chat box, and I'm going to be covering them. Let's move on to some of more slides. So this is also part of the online research that we typically do. So we were into our market positioning, the product design, then online research. So this is probably third or fourth segment that we are looking at. So here, this comment is coming from another affiliate site, and I guess they were slightly fairer in general the way they position. So I don't know if this is done by a person or a bot. That there could be, a possibility that the other one was more of the AI generated content, because now you obviously the affiliate sites are generating a lot of content using AI as well. And sometimes the content creators that are really working on these platforms, they are not necessarily the experts of the platform themselves. So sometimes it's very hard for them to be able to understand these things. Like, they have never implemented, they have never coded these platforms, so they don't know. They are simply looking at the checklist approach of selecting the platforms, and that could be very misleading if you really don't understand what you're getting into. So here we have roughly 296, 887 store owners. Store owners could mean a lot of different things. So depending upon which store your owners and how much GMV that they have on the platform, I think that would define which store owners we are talking about. Marketplace that has 8,689 free add-ons need support. The platform has, and so they have described, I think this was fairer assessment in general for this particular platform. They have listed cons as reportedly prone to errors. Great looking templates, seriously? I'm not too sure about that. I don't know where that comment is coming from. It's definitely not great looking, so I don't know who they are comparing with. This is not right. Okay, so some more comments coming from another affiliate site. So here, 7,000 free integrations and an active online forum. osCommerce has been compromised by hackers, and that's a huge red flag. Once you get hacked once, then you don't get second chance with Google in general. It's very, very, very hard to get that authority back, and that means you are going to lose a ton of market share. So security is a big deal. SEO is a big deal for e-commerce. So again, you might be saving pennies in the e-commerce platforms, but be careful when you're looking at something like this. Again, developers don't understand everything from the marketing perspective, from security perspective. They might be very passionate about this platform because obviously they want to code more, but as a business owner, you need to think about everything. So make sure you are reviewing everything, or hire a consultant who can help you review all of this. Now, here they are saying, even though those holes have been patched, if you wish, you will invest in not just hosting, and a web smart developer is the term that they have used. Now, there is nothing called web smart developer in general. When you are looking at some of these hosting platforms, they are going to have a team of 30 at least, and they are going to have many different skill sets. Even inside the whole IT infrastructure management, there are going to be many different skill sets, and they specialize in those things. So typically a team is hosting this for you. For example, when you are looking at Shopify is going to have an army of different roles and responsibilities, and that's how they are making sure that you are not going to have any sort of security breaches. You are not going to have any sort of PCI compliance issues. Your data is going to be safe and secure. So again, you get a lot more when you are going to go with the commercial platform. With the open source, you are literally on your own, and you don't know how bad it could fire back in general with these open source platforms. Now, here, Okay, I don't have any other comments on this one, so I'm actually going to move to the next one. So now this is the section that we are covering for the user reviews. So typically the approach that we take for user reviews is going to be, we are looking for trends, we are looking for the qualification of the person who is reviewing. We typically call out whether it could be user's fault or could be the vendor's fault. So we are going to be looking at everything, and we are always looking for some sort of trends. If multiple the users have reported the problem in the reviews, then there's probably going to be a problem. So that's the approach that we take with the user reviews. So here the review is coming from 2019, which is very recent in general. Here this is coming from company size 2 to 10 employees. Now obviously that's a very small company, so you can imagine the size of the company that is using this platform. Industry is design, which is mind blowing, because I don't know how they are surviving in the design business with this platform. It's just crazy. Maybe they are a web development shop and they were just on this platform. So maybe this is a review from the partner. That could be a possibility. But if you are going to be in design business, most likely you are probably going to be cutting edge. So I don't know why you would be on this platform. It's just fascinating. So here they are saying there are thousands of plugins that can add to osCommerce, many of which are free. That is true as well. So thank you so much. osCommerce itself is free to download and is open source. Right on. Now the cons. The support for osCommerce is not very great, and the documentation is not as strong as other shopping carts. So one thing, when they say documentation is not as great, what that means is the quality of developers in this community is not as great either, because typically if you look at some of the good developers, they are very good marketers as well. Okay, they know how to sell their code, and that's why if you look at slightly more polished either open source communities or commercial platforms, it doesn't matter. The quality of documentation speaks for how good the platform is going to be and how many defects you are going to get, how much problems you are going to get with the platform. So you can read a lot by looking at the documentation. Now, he's saying, and by the way, when you're looking for open source and you're complaining about support, come on, give me a break. You cannot ask, this is all free, so I don't know what more you can ask for. But that's the reality. I mean, you don't get anything for free. So yeah, this is the best that you can probably get. You are making compromises when you are choosing this platform. Now, the challenge, you probably need an experienced osCommerce expert. Now that's a key. Okay, and these experts are going to be very expensive in general. The smaller the community, the more expensive the developer is going to be. That's given. It's going to be very hard to find developers. Even if you find, they are going to be charging a lot more. Supply and demand, basic finance. So make sure you pay attention to that. So even though you are going to be saving a little bit in licensing, you are going to be paying a lot more in the developer support. And typically that is the reason why developers are pitching for these platforms, because obviously it's in their best interest. They are probably trying to create a job for them, which is reasonable. But again, you need to look at your situation as well. If you're a business owner, you need to look at financials, whether this is the right decision, and you are going to have a little fiduciary responsibility for your business. So make sure you are being fair to your business as well. Now here, who's familiar with the code? The code is not as modern, but it is lightweight and loads fast, which is shocking that they are saying that it is lightweight and then loads fast, which could be a possibility. And that could be the reason why a lot of developers like this platform, because Magento obviously is very thick the way it is done, but you have the enterprise grade capabilities. So that could be another reason why people might be liking it. But again, speed is not just one factor. You have security that could impact your SEO. So SEO is going to have many different layers when you are looking at that. So even though it might be lightweight, still you are going to have issues with this. Now, some more reviews. This coming from 2022. So obviously very recent. Now, one of the trend that you may have noticed in these two reviews, both of them are coming from 2 to 10 employees. So obviously this is very small in general. You are looking at a couple of people that might be there. In general, in retail, the number of employees that you're going to have are going to be far more. So when you are looking at 210, it's really a very small startup in general. they are probably going to be doing revenue of less than 50K or 100K, even if they have 10 employees in general, because those people are not going to be making as much money. So that's the layer that you might want to consider. So here they have used it for 2 years. Interesting. So they are saying there was a time when OSC was a great choice, and I have to agree with Keith on this one for a small business online shopping cart. But that time has passed. I completely agree, because 10 years back you didn't have Shopify's of the world, you didn't have BigCommerce of the world. Now you have probably WooCommerce. WooCommerce is probably going to be better than this. I mean, even though WooCommerce is not a great e-commerce solution either, but it's probably going to be better than this. So again, you have a lot more options that are going to be better than this. So I don't see a reason why you would go for this platform, unless I'm missing something here. So here they are saying, unless you are an expert, get on a platform that manages responsive code. Responsive is the keyword. Okay, so most likely this is probably not going to be responsive, as we could see from these screenshots. If you are not going to be responsive, you are probably not going to be ranking on mobile. So that's a huge risk for you as the e-commerce business. There are a lot of different red flags overall from the e-commerce perspective. Now, security risk. So he has highlighted everything. Now he is talking about the idea of self-hosting and maintain your code is now obsolete. Exactly. Okay, if you're a business owner, and you should not be coding, you should not be thinking about coding. That's not your business. If you're a retail shop, think about how you can run your business with very little maintenance. And yes, sometimes that could mean that you have to share either revenue or pay in the licensing, but you have no idea how expensive open source could get. So again, once you clock in all the cost, even if you are accounting for the internal cost, then you would know how expensive that is going to get. But e-commerce is not supposed to be free. Here they are saying my site was hacked several times, and there was a constant threat that had to be managed. Adding new features, functions also required coding and knowledge of SQL. Can you believe this? Okay, you really don't want to get there, even if you may be very technically sound. You just don't have time and patience for this. Even if you're a developer, if you're running a retail business, if you're running a development shop, then it's a different case. Okay, then obviously you need to be at the top of your game. But if you're running an e-commerce shop, retail, manufacturing, sell, guys, that's what you need to be doing. If you're thinking about anything else, that means you are losing that window of time, as well as the opportunity cost. So what you should be doing is sell more. Here they are saying was not responsive without major code change. There are now better alternative like BigCommerce and Shopify, and I agree with Keith. Just to name a few, threat management and responsive site code is managed by the platform, and there are many templates and integration available. I switched from osCommerce to BigCommerce, and I am happy with that choice. And if you are considering all of those factors, then you will probably be happy with this choice as well. I completely agree. The decision that Keith has made, I think everybody should be doing that in general, unless there is a factor that I am not aware of. Here again, very similar trend. So here also 2 to 10 employees. Sean is coming from the same community. So here industry, wine and spirits, and obviously this is going to be a very unique vertical. They have very unique needs, even in the e-commerce space. So October 2029, we used osCommerce for about 10 years to manage our first online shopping offering for our winery, and it was an efficient tool. However, as time grew, we actually found using it internally for order dispatch and inventory management and basic CRM functions was far better. And I can see why you would do that, because the internal UI is slightly superior. But if you're using this as your ERP system, it might be okay when you are 2 employee, but you are going to have real hard time in using this as ERP. You can get far superior options in the market if you are using this as more of the ERP, order management, inventory management. This is not really designed for that. It's really meant to be for e-commerce, and that too very legacy experience. Now, however, the difficulty with integrating it into our accounting software and our needs for more sophisticated inventory management caused us to eventually move to a different platform, because you are using wrong tool for the wrong job, and that's why you are not finding all of these options. So you are to blame in this particular case, not the platform itself. Now the cons: difficulty encountered with text rounding errors and the need for audit log of please do not use for this use case. That's a horrible use case. You should not be using, you should not be doing accounting using your e-commerce platform. You can be in trouble, so don't do that. So that's it for the review. Now if you I don't see any other comments. Now, in summary, the only thing I am going to say here with respect to this platform, again, if you're a community and you have some reasons why you have to be using this platform, maybe I don't know those, but for the most part in 2023, if you are running your e-commerce business on this platform, you may be in serious trouble overall, from at least from the Google's perspective. So make sure you are rethinking your strategy and maybe consider some other options that are there in the market. WooCommerce is great. Your Magento is probably going to be great if you're looking for slightly more open source options. And the other options that you're going to have in the commercial perspective that the other user reported, which is going to be your Shopify BigCommerce, those are probably going to be your go-to options in general for your platform needs. On that note, thank you so much for dialing in today. That's it for today. If you joined for the first time, this was part of our e-commerce series, for which we meet every Wednesday at 5:30 p.m. Eastern. So make sure you guys are going to be here next week. We are going to come back with another platform or the technology that we are going to be reviewing from the e-commerce community. On that note, thanks everyone for dialing in tonight.